Kyle here from allmediareviews.blogspot.com. Tuesday, October 11th. I got bills I gotta pay. I don't remember on the 11th. 2022. Gonna do another King's X video to get the 6th overall video, the 5th proper studio album. 1994's album Dogman. There's a lot of stuff about it. I didn't bring my book over, but anyway. But here's my CD. See that? And then here's my book. This was produced by Brendan O'Brien. So King's X, after the self-titled album, they were still with Atlantic. This is still in Atlantic, I believe. Yeah. Brendan O'Brien, I believe, had worked with Pearl Jam. And that's how they kind of found out how they wanted to work with him, I guess. Let's see if I click on that. Yeah, he put AC/DC. They toured with AC/DC, Pearl Jam, Stone Temple Pilots, Soundgarden. The only the only band that he didn't work with was Nirvana and Alice in Chains, but 90s, you name it, Rage Against the Machine even, and Bruce Springsteen, among others. But I don't know. This is just on his Wikipedia page. But and this is noteworthy. I guess it's, I think of it as the one, and not in the first, but I guess technically was not the first album that Doug did all the lead vocals, because he basically did all the lead vocals on All the Silent Planet. He didn't do them all on the sneak preview album, but I got the kitty, the other kitty, Kaja, the big one, the boy. He's waking up from his nap now. So anyway, here's the vinyl. So as you can see, this is the vinyl copy I got. This came out, I got it. I can see the year I purchased it. This is 2016. So they must have reissued a lot of these albums until those 3 record store day items last couple of years, in 2016. It's like the self-titled. I bought this, when was that? Early 2017 at Agarda Records. This is red. This cover's red. Even the inside's red. And Dogman was notable in that it had the 4 different covers. In fact, as a completist, as big of a fan as I am, I should have always tried. I bet you there are a lot of fans that basically had to copy and had to track down and collect all 4 covers. That would be something. It probably wouldn't be that hard to find the copies on CD, actually, but pressing, of course. But yeah, this is all Doug lead vocals. There's some harmony vocals from Ty, and I think Jerry. I hear more of Ty. There's the second one. But so they did that. Let's see here. What was it? There was, Manic Moonlights, another record I love. I believe is all Ty. Yeah, it was all Doug's lead vocals also. I think it might have been a lot to do with Brendan O'Brien's decision to do that. So I mean, as I mentioned, they were kind of done with Sam Taylor. They had to get off of working with Sam Taylor, and from a sort of a mental awareness, sort of, the frustrations with trying to have a hit and with the record label. They're still on Atlantic, and then actually seeing a lot of bands that they influenced, in effect, and were friends with, have this success, having bigger success than them. Most notably, those grunge bands, not Nirvana necessarily, but Soundgarden and Alice in Chains and Pearl Jam. This album is probably sounding with, probably Brendan O'Brien's, presence had something to do with it. Their most grunge in a way, I guess. I think it's, in a lot of ways, their heaviest album. In fact, most fans would probably think of it, and I know, the metal fans that love King's X, when they're telling other people about King's X, they're suggesting them. This is often the album they recommend. And, when I first got into King's X, this album this was really the album that most people had been talking about. Um, Even though when I first got into them was '96. I got a friend flying around. That's what the kitty cat's watching window. It was right around the time that Ear Candy had come out, but this was still it. And in fact, the concert I went to with the Galactic Cowboys, with Galactic Cowboys in '96, it was like August of '96. I didn't even say the day this came out. This came out January 18th, 1994. But that I saw at least a couple guys wearing Dogman shirts. I also saw a guy wearing All This on Planet like tank top at that show, most notably at the Mirage, Minneapolis on Hiawatha. But you see the pictures. It's a little different of an image, really, if you think about the other ones. I guess they're less, let's say, hippie-ish. It's more grounded and sort of, I wouldn't call it more metal in terms of the look, but I mean, it has, my go-to songs on it have been for a long time. My favorite track, which does to me has always sounded like a song that, and probably, I haven't gotten this far in the book, of course, on the Greg Prato book, but, it's inside here, is Fool You. Fool You, to me, sounds like a song that should have been on, or was written during the period of the self-titled, or even, Faith, Hope, Love. But I love the sort of story element to that song, just the guitar arrangement, the vocal harmonies, that bum 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 bum. It's very catchy and poppy in a way, and has a very good vibe. Although I'm wondering about the lyrics, and again, I'll probably get into "Walking the Big Parade." It sounds like a song that was maybe written about Sam Taylor, because he was telling them they'll fool you about what they're telling you, that promises and that kind of stuff. Where is it? Walked along the lazy path, walk in the big parade, learn just what to say. They will all try to about record labels and the industry too. But I don't know if I get to the point in the book, I'm on like 120 something in the book, page 120. Probably bought Dogman's in the next couple of chapters. I wouldn't be surprised if that gets mentioned about Sam Taylor. And the other thing is, I don't know if they've ever played it live. I've been meaning to look that up, set listen, when they played here, but they never played it live any show that I went to, unfortunately. The title track, the opening title track, is the other song that I often, and most people think of this album for the most part, first and foremost. And it's a really catchy, well-written track. I mean, it's really in your face. The lyrics, it's very cleverly written. The lyrics, it's very much of like a rhyming sort of, the cadence, and then sort of just the references, 50 cents, all the business undertaking, all my bones and muscles aching, thoughts in my, it's the meter, the sort of the flow of that song is just so well written. It's not my favorite King's X song necessarily, and I don't even think I would probably still not put it above my favorites on this. It's like in the top 3 or 4 songs on this album, but so the other ones I would go to are like Cigarettes. That's always been a live. Dogman's been a live staple too. I've seen them over 10 times. But Cigarettes is a favorite. It's a great kind of sort of moody, therapeutic, psychedelic track. In fact, I was thinking today, Cigarettes would fit well on their new record in a lot of ways, because their new record's got a lot of psychedelic elements to it. I love Cigarettes. I don't love cigarettes themselves. I don't know if but it's almost like the experience of trying to escape with some kind of drug or whatever. That's what I was. But it's very like sort of a, this will help you. I don't want to think about this. This will help. Do you have any cigarettes? I could really use, because the pain blows my mind. I need to escape the pain. But Shoes, Pretend, Black the Sky is kind of crazy. That's one of the most unusual songs, but it works to me. Let's see here. Don't Care is one of their most technical songs on this. Jerry, especially, is very busy on that track. It's not as memorable as some of the other songs on this album, but Complain, again, that to me is their sort of feeling about the whole music industry, and it's like they want to break up. It's just, it's so much easier just to complain about it than just deal with it. What was it? Shoes was the one, I had there's some guys from this band, Mojam, that had a song called Freedom. that of course you have the Wham song called Freedom, you have the George Michael Freedom 90, and then King's X has a song called Freedom too, but they had their own song called Freedom. They're all different. Freedom, talking about the freedom. They were a local band that were King's X fans. I met a couple of the guys at one of the shows I went to. I think it was '98, and they were singing "Shoes" after the show. I remember it was like they loved that track, and it's like, that's a pretty good song. Go to Hell, Go to Hell. It's like a punk song. Pillow is like a slow burn doom metal song. Human Behavior is okay, but I'm frankly not. I've never been into that song that much. Sunshine Rain is all right. I mean, I guess that's could be the sound is just so much different. It's a departure. It's always been that way. Even the sort of detuned guitars don't sound quite the same. I think they were trying to be as heavy as they could, almost to say, yeah, we can sort of do grunge, but we do it our way and we do it heavier. I don't know. They were trying to be marketed as a metal band, and King's X really never has been, even though they were on Metal Blade Records at one point. They toured with lots of metal bands, and metal musicians in metal bands love them. But actually, the truth, they never really have been metal. It's almost like Queen's Stone Cold Crazy. That's a metal song, but Queen isn't a metal band. King's X, this is the closest they ever really came to sounding like. This is the heaviest album in a lot of ways, like I said before. So, I enjoy it. I thought it's just being among the prog and prog metalheads for so long, for a better part of 25 years or whatever, socializing online and at concerts, and seeing musicians talk about it too. This album has always been there, like one of the most recommended, if not the most recommended, and a favorite. And I've always wanted to love it more than I have. I've always enjoyed it. Like within their catalog, you see where it ranks. I enjoy a lot of it, but there's just something about the departure of the sound, despite, they needed to break away from that sound in a lot of ways. They needed to change from Sam Taylor. There's always been something about that, and they had to sort of reinvent their sound. It's almost like the band started over. They could have renamed the band. It would have been weird. That and, the fact that Doug does all the lead vocals, while inherently Doug, among the three singers, probably still is my favorite, there's something about sort of, it's like it's not homogenous, but, it's just Doug, it's like a Doug solo. It's not, but, so that's why I've kind of always felt more people like this album more than I did. And I've always felt like one day this album's going to totally hit me over the head, and I'll be like, and I bought it on cassette, and I'll be like, okay, I finally get it, yes. And I got it on cassette tape when I had a cassette player in my car a few years back, before I had to, get rid of my car that had a cassette player. And I remember listening to it then, I was thinking the same thing, like, I loved a lot of that album, when I used to listen to it more regularly. Let me just see if more of it clicks. And it's still kind of the same kind of reaction I get to it, where, yes, it's got a lot of music I love, but to say that the records that came before it, I've never really been able to say I prefer it. I haven't listened to it as much either. That's part of it. So, but at the same time, again, it's a record that, among their catalog, I understand why people love it, and I do love a lot of it. I mean, a lot of it's heavy, a lot of it's riffy, a lot of it's it flows really well. There aren't, especially the first half. I think having Human Behavior, Cigarettes is a great track, but Human Behavior before it and Go to Hell after it, even Pillow, I'm not thrilled with. It's like that Cigarettes kind of, the second half of the album, Cigarettes kind of stands out. The cover of Manic Depression, which is live, the Jimi Hendrix song, of course, at the time I got into King's X, I enjoyed the Jimi Hendrix experience a lot when I was in high school, so it wasn't that much longer after, and I thought, well, this singer sounds like Lenny Kravitz. And then I got more to the belief that Doug reminded me more of Hendrix. In fact, I once told him, it's Jimi Hendrix reborn. He's got the spirit of Jimi Hendrix in him. So they covered Jimi Hendrix, and he did some other Jimi Hendrix covers later. I got a CD I showed on video a few years ago when I was in the when I was still, all my stuff was in storage on the storage space. But this was a live version, and they played it at Woodstock 1994. That's what I was going to bring up. Woodstock 1994, like they mention, and I always thought this album came out in 93, right? But I thought it's that was 93, right? No, it was 94. Early 94, and I'm going to go over the 94 list in just a minute. But they played it at Woodstock, but that was in August of '94. So the live recording of Manic Depression, I was trying to see where it was actually taken from. One of their live shows, obviously, but yeah, they do a good version. It's for the most part faithful. I mean, it's not. Doug does his Dougisms, and he starts kind of doing some moaning and all that stuff, of course. But tonally, his vocal style, while not identical, it's kind of similar. It's kind of, and he's ironically he's left-handed. He's black. Just like Jimmy. But I don't know if it's coincidence. I don't know if throughout the years they maybe covered Hendrix a lot in the early days. I thought they did more covers of other bands, but he met, when I remember seeing, he met Jimi Hendrix at Woodstock when he was like 18. So he went to Woodstock in '69. So he either saw Jimi Hendrix at Woodstock and or met him. Maybe it talks about it in the book. I'm still getting through it. So they probably talk when they get to the Woods. They'll probably talk about Dogman, because when they were at Woodstock, they were, this is the most recent album that had come out. This is the album that you figured after they played, I'll get into more of that, but they played in front of 250,000 people or whatever, and it was live broadcast on MTV, or like pay-per-view on MTV. You would have thought they would have sold more albums, but it didn't. But, this would have been the likeliest one they would have sold, because it was an album that had only come out like 8 months before that, so. But, as far as, I'd have to get the other, maybe not in vinyl, I don't need 4 copies, but the CDs at least would be a little more affordable potentially. 1994, which is kind of a pretty big year for my personal taste, and it's very top heavy, because I'll just get into it here. But it's not a long year. I don't have like an extensive list. When I made this list just a couple years ago, this retro albums of the year list. You have Marillion's Brave, my favorite album, my number one album ever at this point still. Then you have Dream Theater's Awake, which is my number one Dream Theater album. So very top heavy there. You have Jeff Buckley's Grace, his only proper studio album. I vary, but that's hard to say that, not an album I love, of course. Then Handful of Rain, which is my favorite Savatage album. And then Queensryche's, that's number 4. Number 5 is Queensryche's Promised Land. So you have those top 5, other than maybe Grace, their favorite of that artist's catalog for me. So it is a very top-heavy year, 1994. Then after Queensryche's Promised Land, I put Dogman at number 6. So it tells you. The Division Bell from Pink Floyd, number 7. Fates Warning's Inside Out. Atomic Opera, their debut. I think it was their debut. I think it was For Mad Men Only, the Sam Taylor produced. It's kind of ironic how King's X leaves working with Sam Taylor, and then he puts out Atomic Opera he puts out For Mad Men Only for Atomic Opera, because he worked with them for I don't know how many albums, a few of them. I have like 3 or 4 of their CDs, so I could do a video on Atomic Opera. I'm into them, but they're a big band among King's X fans and Galactic Cowboys fans. So Tiles is self-titled, which is an album I didn't hear then. Obviously, it was a few years later. I got into it. Tiles is a band that's from Michigan, a prog rock band that are very Rush-like at times. And while I wouldn't say that's my favorite Tiles album, that was the one I fell in love with and how I got into them, from that album. But Boston's Walk On, the last Boston album I really ever listened to. And I saw them on tour. Cirque du Soleil's Alegria soundtrack, the one Cirque du Soleil soundtrack I really liked. Dean McGraw's In Effect, his debut on Broken Silence, and Lives Throwing Copper. So you have some stuff on this list, like a Mosquito from Psychotic Waltz. I didn't rank because I haven't listened to it in a long time. Lives Throwing Copper. So Live actually, no, why is I have that on there twice? No, that should be taken off. The Third Matinee album, which I've said my piece about that. I even revisited it last year, or was it earlier this year? So I'm not crazy about it. The Wild Hearts, Fishing for Luckies, Roy Stoltz, The Flower King, and the Cairo debut, which actually isn't bad. I'd probably go for putting that on there. And the Grays albums, Rochambeau, which was Jason Faulkner, and I can't remember one of the other members of Jellyfish. I don't think it was Roger Manning. It might have been Eric Dover. Anyway, so that's kind of it with Dogman. Yeah, I'd finished. I put it in the top 6 albums. I don't know if I would move it at this point, but What do you think of Dogman? Please subscribe if you haven't subscribed. Thank you for subscribing recently if you have. What do you think of King Texas Dogman? Metal fans, do you think it's clearly your favorite, their best? Do you think after the first four, do you really love it? Do you love the title track really foremost, or is it just filled with all these other songs? I mean, it is a heavy song, a heavy album, and it's, naturally it sounds like it's very Doug-centric. Which is not the only album that would follow, which I'll talk about in the coming weeks. But yeah, Dogman's always been an album I've liked. I just find it's one of those albums that I wish I could appreciate it and see it the way a lot of fans do. Now, there's a lot of fans that feel the same way that I do about the first four albums, or sort of that sound is what they love the most. And so Dogman was a departure, but like Marillion with the vocal change, even Fate's Warning in a way, Dogman was almost a reinvention of the band in some ways. And yeah, because if they would have changed their name, but it would have hurt them from a sort of, I don't know if they could have done that. But in a lot of ways, it's just like, the sound clearly changed, and then, they changed after this, but the resemblance of the first four albums is, like, the song Fool You to me is the only real song on this album that resembles those first four albums. But it's a great track. If it would have ended up, it would have been one of my favorite songs on any of those albums too. So, but again, thank you for watching. We'll see you next time.